I was paid to sit in a room and do nothing. The job description was one sentence. Sit in the room. Do not fall asleep. Do not leave. No explanation. No interviews. Just a time and an address. I should have asked questions. I really should have, but I was desperate for money. The kind of desperate where you start weighing your principles against your rent. So when an anonymous email landed in my inbox, offering significant cash for a single night of what sounded like a babysitting gig for an empty room, I said yes. Without a second thought, the address led me to a part of town I usually avoided, a place where streetlights seemed to give up. The building was old, a brutalist concrete box with no signs, no windows on the lower floor, nothing to suggest what went on inside. It looked abandoned, but the heavy steel door was unlocked. A man met me as soon as I stepped over the threshold. He was tall, gaunt, and didn't give his name. He just gestured for me to follow. We walked down a long, sterile hallway that echoed with every step. He didn't say a word until we reached a room at the very end. It was as plain as the outside of the building. Bare concrete walls, a single wooden chair in the dead center, and a large, old-fashioned analog clock on the wall. That was it. He pointed to the chair. No phone, he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. He held out his hand, and I reluctantly gave him my phone. No sleeping, and if you hear breathing, don't look for the source. Before I could process that last, very strange instruction, he stepped out, and I heard the heavy thud of a lock sliding into place. I was alone. The first couple of hours were just boring. Excruciatingly so. The room was silent. And I mean, asterisk. 2. Asterisk. Silent. You know how there's always some background noise? The hum of electricity, the rumble of distant traffic, the creaks of a building settling. There was none of that here. It was a thick, oppressive quiet that felt like cotton in my ears. The only sound was the loud, rhythmic asterisk tick-dash. Talk asterisk of the clock on the wall. Just me, the chair, and the clock, counting down the seconds of my life. I tried everything to stay occupied. I counted the cracks in the concrete floor. I mentally recited every song I knew. I tried to remember the plot of the last movie I watched, but my mind kept drifting back to the man's final warning. Asterisk if you hear breathing. Don't look for the source. Asterisk it was absurd. Of course, I wouldn't hear breathing. I was alone. I must have checked the clock 100 times. Time had never moved so slowly. The hands seemed to mock me, inching forward with agonizing reluctance. La 1:10, alto M, a la 1, y 11 la 1, y 12. My eyelids felt like lead weights. The sheer nothingness was more exhausting than any physical labor I'd ever done. Then, at exactly 1:13 a.m., the single bulb overhead flickered and dimmed, casting the room in a sickly, yellow-gray light, and that's when I heard it. A sound that cut through the silence like a knife. Breathing. It was slow. Wet. A rasping inhale, followed by a long, gurgling exhale. And it was right behind me. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn around, to jump up, to see what was there. But the man's words echoed in my head, a cold, hard command. Asterisk. Don't look for the source. Asterisk. So I didn't. I stared straight ahead at the blank concrete wall, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My eyes burned from not blinking, tears welling up and blurring my vision. The clock continued its relentless ticking, each tick a separate, distinct moment of pure terror. The breathing didn't stop. It became part of the room's soundscape, a horrifying companion to the clock's ticking. But then, it started to move. The sound, which had been fixed directly behind my head, began to shift. It slithered, sonically, from behind me to my left, so close I felt like I could reach out and touch whatever was making it. My skin crawled. I kept my hands clamped on my knees, my knuckles white. I focused on the wall, on a particular stain in the concrete, making it the anchor for my sanity. Then the sound moved again, drifting upwards. It was directly above me now. I imagined something clinging to the ceiling, watching me. The rasping breath seemed to rain down on me. My own breathing was shallow, ragged. I was trapped in a nightmare, wide awake, and then a voice whispered, right next to my ear. It was a dry, papery sound, ancient and tired. "You're early." The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. Early for what? Who was I early for? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but there was no sense to be made. Before I could even formulate a thought, I heard another sound, a creak, the distinct sound of weight settling onto old wood. But it wasn't my chair. I was frozen stiff. I hadn't moved a muscle. There was another chair in the room, or at least something that sounded like one, and someone, or something, had just sat down in it. I could feel the presence beside me. A cold spot in the air, a disturbance in the suffocating stillness. The breathing had stopped. The silence that followed was somehow even worse. I felt a touch, a light brush against the fabric of my shirt on my shoulder. It was ice cold, a cold that seeped through the cloth and into my skin, a dead, profound cold that felt like it came from the grave. My entire body went rigid. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. At that exact moment, the clock stopped. The constant, rhythmic asterisk tick-dash-talk asterisk that had been my only companion and my tormentor for hours just ceased. The silence was now absolute, a perfect, bottomless void of sound. And then the light went out. Not a flicker this time, but an instant plunge into total, complete blackness. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. I was blind. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was not alone. The cold spot next to me felt larger, more solid, and then the voice whispered again. A final, chilling instruction that felt more like a verdict than a warning. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. It could have been minutes, or it could have been hours. Time had dissolved. All I did was obey. I stared into the impenetrable blackness, my body locked in place by a fear so pure it was almost a physical force. Then, just as suddenly as it went out, the light flickered back on, harsh, bright, and unforgiving. The first thing I noticed was the door. It was wide open. The heavy lock was undone. My heart leaped. I was free. I scrambled out of my chair, my legs stiff and trembling, and looked around. The room was empty. Exactly as it had been when I first walked in. The chair I had been sitting on was in the center of the room. The clock on the wall was still frozen at the moment it had stopped. But I wasn't alone. There was another chair, right beside mine. A chair that hadn't been there before. And on it was my jacket folded. Perfectly, naily folded. An envelope with my name on it sat on top. Inside was the cash. Exactly the amount promised. There was no note, no explanation, just the money. I grabbed it and ran. I didn't look back. If you want to hear more true horror stories like this, want stories from people who are paid very well to keep their mouths shut, make sure you subscribe, because some jobs and some rooms aren't meant to be understood. Thanks for watching.